Yeah, this is John Black, Super Chemist, here on part 2 of tariffs, why the elites want low tariffs. In the last, I wanted to bring up this too about the federal, I was saying if we got rid of, if we had high tariffs, we wouldn't have to have federal taxes. Today that isn't true because the government is so giant. But in the past, or if in the future we make government small like it was in the past, then yes, we could literally eliminate federal income tax. I want you to think about this. 50% of the country, all the taxes they collect up from the 50% of the poorest people, right? That only does like 0.3% of the, the taxes that are collected. Meaning you can literally, if you can just shave like 1/3% or whatever it is, it's really small, man. If you could just 1/3 of 1%, just shave that off. Just the garbage things like, paying $1 million a year to give cocaine to birds to see if they get more horny. Yeah, get rid of programs like that, you know what I mean? Which would be easy to do. And 50% of the country wouldn't have to pay any federal taxes. None. Income tax that you file. But yeah, you'd have to have a small government for that. You can't have a giant mega government like we have. So let's see what I got written down here. So what I left off on the last video was, if 90% of our products are made in the USA, how does high tariffs really hurt us? I mean, only that means that 90% of our products would not be changed in their price, right? The only prices that would change would be that 10%. How does that kill everybody and just make us all want to jump out of a 20-story window? How does that? And you could say, oh, you know what? 90%, and I don't know what the ratio is of how much stuff we make compared to how much is, imported in here, you know what I mean? But they've been saying for a long time, we don't make nothing here, you know what I mean? So I'm just going to use this high, I'm always going to say 90%, okay? I don't know what the ratio is, but I know it's high that we're importing stuff compared to what we're making, you know what I mean? We're just going to choose 90% arbitrarily. So you might say, well, right now, though, most of our stuff is imported, so we don't make 90% of our products. We import 90% of our products. So if 90% of our products are imported and you raise up high tariffs, then obviously everyone's going to be affected by the high tariffs. Okay. See, this is a trick. This is a joke. Okay. Because all we have to do. See, this is why I say, whoever that guy is that said we learn our history so that we don't repeat it. Yeah, him and his whole entire family should be exterminated so that they never reproduce. Because that's the dumbest saying. The saying should be, we record our history and we learn it so that we can continually just repeat our history over and over and over and over and over and over. So let's look at our history. Before we got rid of import tariffs, right? Before we did that, right? We used to call those import tariffs protective tariffs. Now, what do we call those protective tariffs today? Import tariffs. What do we call them? We call them I hate poor people tariffs, right? High tariffs. That's what we call high tariffs. We call them I hate poor people tariffs, right? That's basically what we call them. Because everyone says if you like high tariffs, you hate poor people, you make them spend more money on their products, right? So before we changed the name, when they change the name of something, the first thing in your mind should be they changed it for a reason. It's to screw you and try to brainwash you, you idiot. Stop letting them change the definitions of names, just like the newcomers and illegal aliens are illegal aliens. Why do they want to change it? Because it's obvious doublespeak when you say illegal aliens are not criminals. Because if you're illegal, then you're obviously a criminal. So it sounds like doublespeak. But if you say newcomers are not criminals, It doesn't sound, it is doublespeak because you're saying the same exact damn thing, but it doesn't sound like doublespeak anymore. Then they can open the borders. That's what they do. They change the definitions of words so that they can incorporate these words into their message that they're sending to you so that it doesn't sound like doublespeak. So if you want that to stop happening, stop letting them tell you it's racist and you need to change the definition. The definition of a word is not racist. Just like questions are not. I've heard reporters now many times tell the person they're interviewing, you know, questions are racist. How is a question racist? A question isn't stating anything. It's just asking a question. So let's look back when we used to call it high import tariffs. We used to call them protective tariffs because they protect us. What used to happen then? There was no federal taxes, right? Because the government was small. They just took high tariffs, and they took that tariff money, and that's what we used to run our federal government. Nobody else, no one had to pay. And then the tariffs that you did pay, you know, there was only 10% of the products in our country was imported. The other, we made stuff. We were the ones making stuff, right? So when those high tariffs were on the plate, nobody cared because only 10% of the products. You can choose. You can pick or choose. If you don't want to pay the federal government money, don't buy those imported products. You know what I mean? You had the choice, okay? No one was forced, right? So no federal taxes. That was what it used to be. High tariffs, okay? And high tariffs means that we had 90% of our, remember we had 90% all we used to be known. That's why we got where we are. We became number one because we make stuff. We're the makers and the shakers, baby. Now we're not. But high tariffs, see, you get slave labor when you go to third world countries. So when you have high tariffs, your company has two decisions, right? We can either make stuff in the United States and we don't have to deal with tariffs, right? If there's, let's say there's high tariffs. You have let's just say this. You got two choices. You can import stuff, and you get slave labor, so it's cheap. But you also have to import and export, right? You gotta take materials to that third world country and make it, and then there's stuff you make. You have to import them back to the United States. So you gotta have a lot of money for that, right? Or you can stay in the United States. You don't have to worry about importing and exporting supplies to make your products and then importing or exporting your products that you made back to the United States. You don't have to worry about that because you're making it here in the United States. So you don't have to worry about that. But you don't get the slave labor. You don't get the slave labor if you're here, right? So let's say there's low tariffs. What do people do in the United States? They take their businesses, they take them overseas so they can get slaves to work in the third world countries. They can get slaves, right? That's basically what it is. If you have low tariffs, you're legalizing slavery. Basically, that's it. Because then the company goes over to the third world country, gets these slave laborers, and they don't mind importing supplies into that third world country to make their products. They don't mind exporting it out and importing it into our country, the products that they made with those supplies that they took to the third world country. They don't mind that. Because the slave labor is so great that the profit from that it overcomes, okay? That's what happens when you have low tariffs. What happens when you have high tariffs, right? What do the companies do? The companies say, well, yeah, I'm going to make a lot of profit by having slave labor, but it's all going to be canceled out with all these high tariffs. So I'm not going to take all my businesses overseas. I'm going to keep my business in the United States. And guess who? Yeah, you know, if you have businesses in the United States, guess who they hire? Yeah, U.S. citizens. Guess what? When U.S. Citizens have their businesses in third world countries, Guess who they hire? Third world people. They don't hire, and then they don't even pay them right. They hire, that's why you want the companies in the United States, because that determines who they hire. Whatever country they're in, that's where they're going to hire the people from, right? The employees, they're going to hire from another country, where the factories in one country, and they travel from country back and forth to get to work. No, that doesn't. No, that isn't the way it works. Okay. And back then, only 10%. And I'm just making up numbers, but you know what I'm saying. There was only a small fraction of the goods that were sold in the United States that were actually imported. When you had high tariffs on them, who cares? Just don't buy off of them companies if you don't like their high tariffs. And what's funny is, when you have the high tariffs like that, these companies from other countries come in, right? They have to sell their products at a competitive rate to what we have, right? Like if we pay our workers good, okay, our average are good, right? So our products are going to be more expensive, right? So say this teddy bear is $10, right? Now the guy importing, he can make his teddy bear and even waste all that money importing it over here, right? He could sell his teddy bears for $2, right? Now what? This business in the United States is going to go out of business, isn't it? It can't compete. If you got low tariffs, he can't compete with this $2 teddy bear. There's federal wages laws. You can't pay your employees like a slave. So he goes out of business. That's what happens when you get whatever. But if you only have 10% of your, if you make all your stuff, see that's why we used to have 90% made in the USA. Now we import 90% of our goods. Why? Because that 90% kept getting dwindled and dwindled and dwindled and dwindled and got smaller and smaller and smaller because they can't compete with slave labor. See, when you legalize slave labor, then the companies that don't use slaves, they go out of business because they can't compete with companies who uses slaves. Okay, so if you like slaves, you want low tariffs. I get it, because you condone slavery. But if you're against slavery, you want high tariffs to prevent this from happening, right? All it does is destroy all of our low tariffs. All it does is destroy all of our businesses. Makes them go bankrupt. And what happens to wages? Back in the day, your wages actually went up. You ever hear of wages going up in the last whatever? Since we've had low tariffs? Since we've had low tariffs, man, it's wages are very stagnant. They don't like to pay more because how can they? We made slavery legal by having low tariffs. So the company's going to go, a USA company's going to go to other countries, and those countries that are already, the foreigners are going to come here. Everyone's going to come here. Even our own citizens are going to go over there to get stuff to bring over here. You know what I mean? So yeah, wages went up. There's no slave labor. The slave labor was down to a minimum because we only imported like 10% of the stuff. You know what I mean? And if we made it in the United States, we had the tariffs high enough so that they couldn't undercut us, but low enough where they could still make money. You know what I mean? That's the way it should be, right? That way we don't lower our stand. We don't. If you want to be a third world country, then that means then you want all these low rates for stuff. Yeah, okay, but you're going to be a third world country, all right? The economy would grow, right? The economy did the opposite when we have low tariffs. The economy goes, people in the USA goes bankrupt, or they just shut down their company and open up their company up in another third world country, and then they just import their stuff over here because they got slave labor. USA was strong. Oh, and we were strong. Why do you think we were strong? Because we had money for a military, and we had the dollar. Everyone's economy was based on the U.S. dollar right now, but that's changing.